wanted to, on a lighter note, introduce Linda Paine. Linda is the co-founder of the Election Integrity Project, and in 2010, she started a 8-year campaign. It took 8 years, but the organization collected data on the easily manipulated California election process that led to a lot of fraud and corruption, and their efforts paid off because in 2018, they filed a lawsuit against the California Secretary of State and the LA County Registrar of Voters, and the suit ended in a settlement that requires the state to clean up the voter rolls. And I know that Linda works tirelessly, and her last name is Paine, and I know it's been very painful, what she's endured, but I really admire her for not giving up. Sometimes it's very easy in California to say, well, whatever, we're never going to get the voter rolls, cleaned up, and it's a losing battle. So I really admire her for sticking with it, and I encourage you tonight to attend the free class and workshop that she's hosting. I know it's going to have a lot of information and stuff that you can actually get involved with that really does make a difference. So let's welcome up Linda.
Well, thank you all for being here, and I especially thank Jan and the board and all of you who worked so hard to get the word out and let people know about what's going on. You all might not know this, but in 2012, we used to have a huge team in Santa Clara County who actually went to the polls that first time out in 2012 and provided some critical information. So the team didn't continue after that, but we're hoping we might convince you all to change your mind and join the statewide effort. So our talk tonight, I'm going to try to move through it. I have a lot of information, and I appreciate, Jan, that you've given me time to go through it so I don't have to run through it, so I can give you a little bit more detail about what's going on. We are now the Election Integrity Project California. We filed a nonprofit in 2017 so that we would have an easier time raising money for the suits, but let's go ahead and get going. Samuel Adams said, "No people will tamely surrender their liberties," and he's right. In 2009, with the jumpstart of the Tea Party movement, many people who'd never been involved in politics got involved in lots of various citizen groups. It wasn't all just Tea Party. We began to see taxpayer groups, property rights, parental rights groups that started. And there were approximately 250 citizen groups around the state that got started in just that year, and it grew from there. Election Integrity Project, EIP, was founded in December 2010 as a C corporation because at that time the IRS was not giving nonprofit status to conservative type organizations. And on counsel of one of our pro bono attorneys, they recommended that we file as a C corporation, not in California, because if we intended to dig into the issues of California's elections, it might be possible that California might not be happy about it. So we did file in Wyoming as a C corporation, and we got to work. It was under the for-profit company that never made a profit because every penny that came in to the organization went to the work itself. We are a citizen organization built of wide ranges of people's background, many of them retired professionals, and that's why we're good at what we do. These are citizens who are retired attorneys, retired paralegals, retired data analysts people, retired educators. That's what I did before I started doing this. I taught college prep courses for junior, senior high. But by 2017, we knew that all the work we had been doing in California was going nowhere. We couldn't get anyone in positions of power and authority to take action on our reports. So by 2017, we put out our first press release detailing the fact that California had approximately 3 to 4 million people on the inactive list in the state of California. We made that report public, and Judicial Watch contacted us within 2 weeks and said, "Is this true? And you proved it?" So after 2 long conversations where they really vetted us to determine if we actually, how we do our work, the security that we protect the work with, and were our board members and our chief analysts able to take the stand and present the information. And so after 2 weeks, they decided we could hold up under scrutiny, and we retained them and filed the first suit. Judicial Watch attorneys tell us that it was a historic suit because never in the state of California has a citizen organization, document the truth about what's happening in our elections, filed suit against the Secretary of State and the LA County Registrar of Voters, and won. So this is huge. So EIP and now EIP California, this is what we do. We train citizens to observe and document the election process. Our very first board meeting was up here in the northern counties, and our board member, who's a retired paralegal, showed up with a box of books 3 inches thick called the California Election Codes. And she said, if we're going to do this, we better know California's election laws. And we all laughed. She didn't laugh. She said, if we're going to win this, we have to know this. And that's how we began studying the 3-inch thick book of California's election laws. When we decided to do this, we asked the question, why would we continue if it becomes difficult? And the answer to that is we will do it in such a way that we cannot be scrutinized, that our facts are solid, and that the way with which we do our work is nonpartisan and it is based on integrity. And that's what we've done. So we took that training. We decided in California, we learned in California, California is the only state in the union that allows citizens the right to observe every aspect of the election process, to ask questions and get answers. No other state in the union can do that. The citizens in every other state has to ask a party, political party, or a candidate to observe their own election process. We in California, we really encourage you to be thankful and take advantage of that, because it is because we have that freedom, believe it or not, we have been able to document every aspect of the election process and prove the truth about what's happening here. We decided to train citizens to go to the polls and observe the process in the voting process in the polls and see if the laws were being followed. Bottom line, by 2012, our first election out, where we trained 2,100 people to go to 36 counties, we identified that the election codes were not being followed, that procedures instead were put in place that made it easy to manipulate the process. And because of our training, we had a 5-hour training so that our citizens really understood the election laws and felt confident in what they were observing. Our process follows the law. We cannot talk to voters or even the poll workers, just the inspector. And our procedure, which we won't cover now, we don't have time, allowed them to observe and document the process, approach the inspector, show them what the law says. 80% of inspectors, when looking at the law, were stunned that they were not taught the law. So sometimes they chose to change the procedure they were following in order to follow the law. Other times they didn't, and at that point our observers step outside and contact us as the headquarters, and we would take it from there. So we take then that research. We researched what was happening in the polls through our observations program, and we're hoping to expand our team here in Santa Clara County. And then we also researched the voter rolls. We began researching the voter rolls in 2011, and immediately we determined that California was not in compliance with federal law to have a top-down centralized database. Top-down means that if you register here in Santa Clara County and you happen to have moved up from San Diego County, that registration would be flagged as being registered in another county, and it could be fixed immediately. By 2011, when we started, we learned that California was using a bottom-up system. They had been given a waiver from the Department of Justice to do a bottom-up system, meaning that the statewide database was built upon each county, supposed to be running the data in their counties, and monthly sending a report to the Secretary of State's office, where they then updated the statewide database. Well, we began running the data then county by county, since we decided that the bottom-up system could not possibly counted upon to be accurate. And we were correct. We identified immediately 60,000 anomalies in LA County alone. What we did with each of our reports is provide it to the registrars of voters to let them know, here are the issues that we see as problems. We wanted them to let us know if we're correct, and if we were correct, we wanted them to take action on them. The bottom line is there was only one county who actually took action on the issues that we provided. We also began documenting the legislative process, and what we learned over time is the incident reports and the findings reports that we provided to the registrars was then being shared quarterly at their quarterly meetings. And then the next year, we would see laws that were passed to actually make it legal to do the very things we identified as weakening the integrity process. And that's why we're here now. Fast forward to 2016. The issues we saw in 2016 were so bad that one of our volunteers observed a polling location where 3 men were sitting with the actual voted ballots, not the ones in envelopes. They were sitting with them in front of 3 open cardboard boxes, going through them, putting them into the different boxes. The actions we took is our volunteer stepped out, called us, asked if she could take pictures. We called one of our pro bono attorneys. He said, if you think a crime is being committed, go ahead. She went in, took pictures. We contacted our pro bono attorney from that county, and she immediately went into county counsel's office, which is the attorney for the county. She went to the registrar's office, talked to the fraud department of the registrar's office, and went to the DA's office and let them know that our observer was in process of watching voted ballots gone through and divided up. We also called the LA Times and said, if you believe there's no voter fraud happening, come to this poll. After 4 hours, nobody arrived. Nobody. Our observer stood in front of the car so the men wouldn't leave, and they simply laughed at her because they knew nobody was coming. At 4 hours, we let her go home. But after 2016, we decided that we could no longer trust any jurisdiction or level of law enforcement to take action with the critical documentation we had been providing up through 2016. And in 2017, that's why for the first time ever, we made our research public. We decided we had to go outside the state of California and reach out to federal level attorneys to help us to take action. And thank God Judicial Watch took our report seriously. And that's when we filed action. So for 8 years, we've researched, observed, documented, and reported serious issues with California's election process, and we've provided reports to every authority who could have fixed the problem. 2013, we actually had our first case ready to roll against the Secretary of State. We retained J. Christian Adams in 2011 when we started. J. Christian Adams is a federal election law attorney who was on the who worked with the Department of Justice in the first year that President Obama came on board. He was the one who was going to prosecute that new Black Panthers case. Did you remember that one for way back then? He was told that there was no intimidation because white people could not be intimidated by minorities. This was the beginning of a true division of Americans. We cannot and should not allow ourselves to be divided by the color of our skin or our background. I am Spanish Irish. When I tried to, in 1970s, when I tried to get aid for college, I was told by the clerk I sat behind, oh, well, your mother's last name is Ortiz, so if you change your last name to Ortiz, we'll give you a full ride. We'll pay for your housing. I said, what about the Irish side? Well, you don't really qualify. So I walked away. We are doing that to America now. We are allowing ourselves to be torn apart by our heritage and our background, and I say it's time to say no. We cannot. We're either going to work together as Americans regardless of party affiliation and color of our skin and last name, or we're going to lose our country. And that's my personal opinion, not that of VIPCA. But in 2013, we had a court-ready case. We had retained J. Christian Adam. He taught us how to do this work. He helped us to put together that first case, and it was ready to go. But we could not raise money to file the suit, and so that suit went nowhere. And we put it on our website as a white paper. But by 2015, we had documented so much evidence that the California Committee to the United States Commission on Civil Rights was willing to review our documentation up to that point. After 9 months, the 2 women who were on that committee, a Democrat and a Republican, after reviewing our information, they agreed that we qualified for an open public hearing with the United States Commission on Civil Rights. August 28th, 2015, that hearing was held in LA County. It was not publicized. There were no cameras. No party member from any parties in the state went to that hearing. But what EIP did at that time, we were still the for-profit, we had 82 people from around the state, as far up as Trinity County, in the Bay Area, all the way to the Nevada border, through the Central Valley, and all the way in the southern counties who came to testify. All political parties were represented in our volunteers, all ages, all abilities, And the regional commissioner to the United States Commission on Civil Rights was so stunned at the mountain of evidence that we brought forward and the wide range of American citizens that after a full days of reporting, he said that in the report he was going to recommend that every state in the union have the right to do what we're doing in California. Citizens must have the right to oversee their election process because that is the way that we choose those who govern us. The bottom line is that report was heavily redacted and buried. That's why none of you know about it, and that's where it still is hidden in the Department of Justice. We're going to reach out again to Attorney General Barr and ask him to unbury that report and take a hard look at what has already been identified in California by 2015. So what did we learn? This is going on our 9th year now. We have learned that the election process has in fact become corrupt. And that corruption is in fact systemic. It's not just San Francisco and LA County. We learned that the corruption looks different in every county, and that's why county teams and community teams to observe and document is so, so critical. We must now continue to identify what happened in 2018, county by county, community by community. We know that integrity is actually being removed from the election process through legislation. And in fact, in 2018, AB 3075 was passed. While we were all busy with elections and putting out our teams, we trained 1,000 people in 2018 to go to the polls in 21 counties. We did not have the bandwidth to oversee the legislation in 2018. During that time, AB 3075 established the Office of Cybersecurity. The Office of Cybersecurity sounds really good, and in the first presentation of it by Assemblyman Berman, indicated that it would be to ensure that our machines were secure and online registration would be secure. But after 5 amendments, the office became an office to monitor our speech. And it's very interesting. It's the registrars of voters and the Secretary of State have now become weaponized with a $3 million budget to monitor conversation and messaging on all media platforms, including our phones. And if they determine that the language causes people to lose confidence in California's election process, they may then determine if the language is so dangerous that it merits using that $3 million to shut down that conversation. Who do you think that office was made for? We have provided that information to Judicial Watch attorneys, our Landmark Legal Foundation attorneys, J. Christian Adams, and the attorneys in California, and they all agree this is very serious. This is an attack on our First Amendment rights. California, EIPC California will not back down. We are confident in what we say. We know that everything we tell you, we have documented with proof, and our attorneys tell us the same thing. They say we have the right to speak, as do you. You may quote us at any time. We're going to provide our research back on our website so that any of you who want to share with others what's happening, you may quote us, and that will wrap you in some protection. But we intend to sue. We're going to go after this office, and it's not just us. All of our attorneys are saying this can't stand. It's created a chilling effect on speech. But we will not roll over, and I'm going to tell you everything that we've documented, and I'll continue to tell the citizens of California what we've documented. We ask you to consider joining us. Citizens are, in fact, losing our voice in government when the government can pass a piece of legislation that monitors the voice of a citizen oversight group. We have handouts on the table to let you see this. This is what we've been documenting, and this is why I made a handout of this one. These are the areas of manipulation that we've identified beginning in 2012. In 2012, EIP trained 2,100 volunteers to observe the polls in 36 counties. We identified these issues in 2012 and in every election since, and in every county where we had teams go to observe the polls. We'll start with vulnerable populations. Seniors, college students, and non-citizens, legal and illegal, are vulnerable. Why? Because they can be easily manipulated because they are dependent upon someone else for their well-being. Students need good grades. seniors living in senior facilities or anyone with any kind of difficulty, physical or emotional or mental, in which they have to depend on caregivers, are easily manipulated because of our election laws allow those who are managing the homes or facilities to manipulate their clients. And non-citizens, both legal and illegal. We know they are being manipulated even before the motor voter roll bill came up. We identified in 2012 that the federal law, the National Voter Registration Act, Section 7, is the culprit. It's the beginning. The National Voter Registration Act, Section 7, requires every government agency that provides assistance to anyone in need, citizen or not, HUD housing, food stamps, Social Security, medical, no matter what it is, they must provide a voter registration application in their packet of information. So imagine the numbers of people that come across our borders asking for asylum. The first place they go is to get help, and they are being helped to get there. Every one of them is given a voter registration application, as in every office. So HUD housing, they get one. Food stamps, they get one. Medical care, they get one. Social Security, minimum of 4. They don't even know they're being manipulated, because if they don't speak the language or understand our system, all they're told to do is sign here, sign here, sign here, put your name here and here. Never mind the rest. Never mind the question that says, are you a U.S. citizen? Leave that blank. We have provided this to our legislators in 2012, that this is a problem. There were a couple of legislators who attempted to help us correct the problem, but it was shot down. The reason they say it doesn't matter if they sign the question, are you a U.S. citizen, is because when they sign it, there's a declaratory statement that says, I swear under penalty of perjury that I'm a U.S. citizen, I'm 18 years of age, and I'm registering. If you don't read English, you don't know what you're signing. You're just signing it because you need help. But by not checking the box, are you a U.S. citizen, what they removed was the ability to prove intent. And I want you to keep that in the back of your mind, the ability to prove intent. Prosecutors will not take any kind of legal action on any kind of voter fraud or irregularities or even suspicion unless they know they can prove intent. Now, in between 2016, between the primary and the November election, we met with one county's registrar of voters, the fraud department, 3 investigators from the DA's office, and the fraud department for the county. We brought to their attention the hard copy voter registration applications for 25 people. We had a total of approximately 200 from that county, where the voter registration application was almost identical. Then this is how the duplicates are done by those who manipulate people who don't know any better. Instead of the application for Linda Paine, where I don't use an initial, they just add an initial. They still register at my domain. You have to register at a residence so that that stays the same. But they'll adjust the birth date. Instead of 2/2, it's 2/12. That ever so slight adjustment means that that duplicate will not be caught in the general way that registrars run for duplicates. They won't see it. The way we work, we have developed proprietary ways that we run research, and we've identified up to 7 duplicates for one person by simply adjusting the middle initial or the name, or adding a junior, a senior, putting the last name first. So we brought 20 to 25 hard copy examples of the duplicates. We asked the DA, can you open an investigation into these duplicates? He said no, and he said no because we can't prove intent. The reason they couldn't prove intent is on those duplicates, the person who had duplicated them, there were 5 people who did, they duplicated the registration as is, John Doe, and the variations I mentioned, but they signed it, Michael Smith. So, and then they stamped the duplicated registration with the company that they worked for. So the DA said, with that, we cannot prove intent, because if we go to the company the company say, that's not our policy procedure. We would never allow that. If you go to the person who duplicated, all they have to do is say, my company told me to do it. And there you have, you can't prove intent. That's why when the media says there's no voter fraud, because if there was, where's all the lawsuits? Where's all where's the cases? They're not being filed. And we have documented hundreds of thousands of duplicates in the state of California. But we cannot see action taken on them because there are no protections in the way that the registrations, they're not, people are not being mandated to check, I am a U.S. citizen, for one. And the registrars of voters do a terrible job of running queries. Even though we have provided them with the way that we run the queries, only one county began to run queries the way we showed them so they could catch the duplicates. So when everyone's mad at illegals getting on the voter rolls, they are being manipulated, both citizens, non-citizens, legal and illegal. The problem with the non-citizens who are here legal on a green card, if they've been manipulated and added to the voter rolls without their knowledge, and someone is actually voting on them because all they have to do is send that registration to a post office box, which we identified in 2014 that that's what's happening. We had 2 post office box managers call. One box in one site had 50 vote-by-mail ballots in one of their boxes that didn't get voted at the end of the elections, and they wanted to know what to do with them. The other had about 100. So that's how ballot harvesting has been happening even before the new ballot harvesting bill. It is illegal ballot harvesting, and it is still happening. But the manipulation of the registration process, we call it voter registration fraud. That is at the top of the list of how elections in every state in the union are being manipulated. And that's something that can be looked at by our legislative body. We've attempted to press that since 2012, and nothing has been done about it yet. Okay, voter roll is not maintained. We won our lawsuit on that. We won't go into much on that because those were the issues we proved. Vote by mail is been determined by 2 election commissions as the least secure way to vote. We are asking everybody, and we're asking the party, to consider turning that around. Here's what you need to know about vote by mail. In 2012, California cast 40% of all provisional ballots nationwide. That's, again, another ballot in an envelope. That means that someone went to the polls to vote and they weren't on the list or there was a problem. They had to vote with a provisional ballot. Again, now hear the number. 2012, our first time out, we identified through the Pew Research, California cast 40% of all provisional ballots nationwide. In 2016, California cast between 60 and 70% of all provisional ballots nationwide. 2018, it was 60, 70. 2016 was 60%, 18. 60 to 70%. Why? We documented from our reports coming in and from citizens contacting us that thousands and potentially hundreds of thousands of vote-by-mail voters did not receive their vote-by-mail ballot. So when they went to the polls to vote, they had to use a what? Provisional ballot. We also learned that thousands and potentially hundreds of thousands, we're going to do an audit and we'll get to the bottom of how many, were registered in-person voting. That was their preference, only to find that when they went to the polls, they were told by the check-in clerk that they had been changed to vote-by-mail ballot without their knowledge or permission. Let's just say that's illegal. That's not just odd. Our big concern came when one person said, well, I didn't get the vote-by-mail ballot. Oh, by the way, those who were changed, they didn't get vote-by-mail ballots either. So our question is, what happened to the thousands and potentially hundreds of thousands of missing vote-by-mail ballots? Were they intercepted? Were they harvested illegally? And were they voted? We think that's a possibility because one of our teams in Ventura County documented that vans and buses were coming up to a particular polling location where the people got off the bus and came to a gentleman in a suit who then handed them what appeared to be a vote-by-mail ballot. It could have been a sample ballot. We don't know because she didn't get close enough. But the man had them mark that ballot, sample ballot or vote-by-mail ballot. He then directed them to the polling location where another gentleman met them and walked them in, and they walked right past the proper check-in procedure, other than indicating a name, walked them to the polling booth and helped them vote. Now, our observer did what she was trained to do. She immediately went to the inspector and said, this procedure is not consistent with my understanding of the law. Let me show you the numerous laws. And the man immediately interfered and said, these are all my family members. We don't have to. Now, that's not the law either. So she stepped outside, called our coordinator, who then called us. We called attorneys. We called the registrar's office. The registrar's office sent a supervisor, who then proceeded to harass our volunteer. So we have some serious problems with civil rights being violated. We're going to go after all of this. We have a new public interest law firm in California that is being put together for the purpose of helping EIPCA and other citizens who need help. Vote by mail ballots. Any ballot in an envelope can and is being manipulated. Once you vote by mail, let's say you actually got yours, you filled it out, you took it to the post office. In 2014, San Joaquin County, 2 bags of vote-by-mail ballots were found in a closet 3 months after the elections. All of those people who voted by mail thought their ballot counted. It never left the post office. You have to understand, during elections, hundreds and hundreds of temp workers have to be called in to handle the volume of mail. We don't know if the temp workers have a political agenda. They're not vetted in the same way because there's just no time. Once your ballot gets there, they're going to check it to see if it matches the signature on your registration application. But guess what? They're not checking your signature to your registration anymore. They're checking it to the signature on in the DMV, that little 4-inch window. So that's not always going to match the signature on your ballot. But let's say that it does match. The next step is not to take it out of the envelope and run it through the counter. The next step is to take it out and check it out. They're looking at your private ballot to determine if there's a crinkle or a spot or a coffee drop, to make sure it's going to go through the counting machine. If it doesn't, if there's any problem with it, maybe there's a crinkle. Oh, whoops, crinkle. We have a machine in one county that continued to crush the ballots as it went through, and after 5 days of our volunteers going to the supervisor saying, that machine is crinkling all of the ballots, it's not going to go through the reader, they never removed the machine. Why? Because they know if there's a crinkle, they have to remake the ballot. So you voted by mail. You did careful. You did everything. It got there. It checked it. During the processing, someone determined that your ballot might not go through the machine. Then they hand it over to be remade. So to be remade, you have 2 people who are going to remake it for you. This first person is supposed to read exactly what the voter intended, the way it's marked. The next person is supposed to take that fresh, clean ballot and mark it exactly as the person is reading it to them. We've documented the breakdown right there. Sometimes those who have a political agenda, this person reads it the way they wanted you to mark it, and that's where your vote got changed. Sometimes it's the person marking that brand new clean ballot. They have a political agenda, and they marked it the way they wanted you to mark that ballot. You will never know if your ballot was processed in a way that changed your vote. And that's why we are saying, please make a change in the way you're registering. So the Office of Cybersecurity doesn't like our message, and we're saying bring it on, because we have documented this, and it's correct. It's true. If you want to have a party make a difference, then they have to know that the ballot counts. And we are nonpartisan, and so I'm not speaking to one party or the other. But I am saying, if you vote by mail, you're not in the polls. You're what we call invisible. So who are all these people at the polls in the long lines trying to vote? Well, they're not this party, because this party is voting vote by mail. And this party has no idea how many of those ballots maybe were changed, because in some counties, the outside of the ballot has your political persuasion on it. We agree with the 2 election commissions who said the least secure way to vote is vote by mail. And we encourage you now, before 2020, the state of California, alert everyone you know to make that change and make sure that you're registered the way you want to be registered. We've been hearing since 2012 people's voter registrations are, in fact, being changed without their knowledge or permission, sometimes to a different party, sometimes to no party preference, which, by the way, is the fastest growing party in the state. So vote in person, check it often, make sure your signature matches. You probably have to go to the registrar's office to make sure they've accepted your new ballot. You want to get the name of the clerk who helps you, get a picture of your ballot to make sure you know that you filled it out the way you want it. Because what we've been told since 2012 is that all of these mistakes are because the voters are so stupid they just forgot they changed it. We don't believe that. There's just too many. Provisional ballots. We need to have a higher standard to not vote with provisional ballots. You know what would end the high number of provisional ballots? Photo voter ID. Photo voter ID. Why do our legislators not want photo voter ID? 60 to 70% provisional ballots in California, and most of them were counted. LA County in 2014 boasted of counting 90% of their provisional ballots. It's a problem. All right, how did this happen? Well, we believed that elected officials would keep their oath of office without citizen oversight. And we didn't know that we had to keep the republic. We didn't even understand the concept. What is keep the republic? It began with our founders in the Constitutional Convention of 1787. Benjamin Franklin emerged from the convention where they were discussing what kind of new government we would have. They were discussing if they were going to become a monarchy, that means government by a king or queen, or if they were going to become a republic, not a democracy, a republic. When Benjamin Franklin left the convention, Mrs. Powell, a woman at the time who could not vote, she asked him, "So what have you given us? A republic or a monarchy?" Without hesitation, Franklin said, "A republic, if you can keep it." Say that with me, please. If you can keep it. We have not been keeping the republic because somewhere about the early 1900s, we began to be told that we didn't have to be involved. Y'all are busy. The Industrial Revolution happened. People were moving. Don't worry about it. Just elect us and go about your business. We'll get it done. But in those days, after when the country was being founded, everyone was involved in understanding who was governing because they had fled. The most powerful nation on earth came to a new country, and they wanted to know what was going on. They fled tyranny. They fled religious persecution. They understood that government impacts our lives whether we want to be involved in government or not. And they were having conversations in the newspapers about federalism or anti-federalism. And so she knew to ask. In a constitutional republic, I'm going to give you a little bit, this is my background teaching, so I apologize, but I want to teach you just a little bit about this because this is critical, and I hope you will tell everyone else you know about the distinction. In a constitutional republic, that form of government means that supreme power resides with the people and their elected representatives, not in their elected representatives. Those representatives must govern according to the existing constitutional law. Why do you think there's a movement to get rid of the Constitution? And a constitutional republic limits government's power over citizens, and it protects the minority from the tyranny of the majority. The United States was founded as a constitutional republic, not a democracy or an oligarchy. And I want you to know these distinctions because this is important. This is what a democracy is. It basically is a tyranny of the majority. It's a system of government in which the people choose their governors through a direct vote, also known as the popular vote. What's being pushed in our country right now? Popular vote. This conversation about popular vote and democracy or republic was being had in the 1700s in the newspapers, and people were determining, and the governments of these, they weren't states at the time, but they were discussing the issue of who has more power, the small states or the big states. So they realized in a simple democracy that 51% can tell the other 49% to shut up and sit down, because majority rules. And that's why a democracy is considered tyranny of the majority. So if the majority of people, of governors or legislators in one state say, we're going to now have abortion after the baby is born, when the 49% say, wait a minute, that's wrong, they say, shut up and sit down. I don't think so. We as Americans need to stand up and stand up and stand up again and be visible and loud. We are too polite. We sit in our homes and yell at our TV. That can't continue. That can't continue. So let's talk about another form of governing. This is called an oligarchy. Now I want you to really think about this. This is an actual political way of governing. It's rule by the elite, or those who think they're elite. It is a system of government in which all power is vested in a few people or in a dominant class. Can a dominant class be a worldview, such as progressivism or global progressivism? So if you look into our history, you'll see progressivism began all the way back with President Wilson. They are patient. They have plotted and worked within our own system to begin to change the foundational principles of the country. Every foundational principle of this country, which is based on Judeo-Christian principles, has been under attack. And now by using our way that we choose those who will govern our election process, by manipulating the election process, they are putting themselves in power at every jurisdiction, from school board, city council, board of supervisors, statewide, national, all the way up. Once they put themselves in positions of governing, they have the right to make laws. That's why we started this company in 2010. We in the southern counties had no idea that the water was being dried up to the food basket of the world. Who would vote for that? And what we learned is that those in positions of power and authority, once they know that we the people cannot remove them through the vote, they don't care what we think or what we say. And we have proven that we the people in California right now cannot choose those who are governed. We cannot remove those who are corrupt without a federal investigation into the state. And we are asking for that, and I'll tell you that in a couple of minutes. Again, the United States is a constitutional republic. We can all help that if we all stop saying, in our democracy, all the pundits, all the legislators all say, in our democracy, we have to protect democracy. Well, now you know why they keep saying that, because then we sort of get it in our heads, majority rule. In California, one party is a supermajority. So what does the other party have to do? Say it with me. Shut up and sit down. And that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing, because we're not out there. We're not out there telling people about the difference of governing styles. We're not out there showing a clear distinction between forms of government, a democracy or a republic. We're not out there empowering citizens to get involved. And I'll tell you something. In Ventura County, there are new citizens who are fierce. 82 citizens, 82 to 86 citizens in Ventura County went out to observe the polls in 2018. Half of them brand new naturalized citizens, scared to death because they came from socialistic countries and they know what's happening and they are fierce. We Americans need to become fierce, because what we're looking at is socialism, and now the mask is off. Candidates from one party are actually speaking. Let's move it in that direction. If we don't want to move it in that direction, we need to be bold about speaking about this issue with our family, our neighbors, our friends, our coworkers. Is there a risk that we might lose our jobs for some? Yeah, it's become that. Is there a risk that the Office of Cybersecurity might get mad? Yeah. The success of this new form of government, this constitutional republic, was and still is completely dependent upon citizens engaging in self-governance. We don't even know how to self-govern anymore. Once upon a time, this country was built on that. But over time, it's not taught in our schools. It's not talked about in our families. We need to start talking about this at the dinner table, when you go to the park, your walk partner, whoever it is. This is the message of California citizens in 2019. We need to, again, self-govern. We need to understand the difference. Self-governance is a government by the people, making up any group, a community, a church group, a county, who actively participate in the process of governing. And this is the difference. Balanced government is a result of self-governance. Those who govern control the citizens 365 days a year. California passes 700 to 1,000 bills every year. My goodness, don't they have something better to do? But citizens control those who govern 365 days a year if they're self-governing. What does that mean? That means that we start to pay real close attention to the bills that are being on the docket. Our Director of Education and Training, Ruth Weiss, we've asked her to change her hat and dig into legislation because of realizing how this state is being forcibly changed through bad legislation. So she is now our Director of Legislative Oversight. She needs help with those who can either help read the bills or who will help organize citizens in your community to be ready to roll when we ask you to. When we look at a bill, let's say in 2018, AB 3075, had we been on it, we would have noticed that the very first amendment began to move in the direction of monitoring our speech. And we could have sent alerts out to every citizen in the state. And we could have had a voice in that amendment process. We weren't paying attention because we were overwhelmed with preparing for elections. 2019, we want to be on it. And we're going to ask you to consider being part of a massive effort to send letters. We've learned over time that when we send emails, they say they didn't get them. If we try to phone them, the line is always busy. What works is the mail. They cannot mess with law that governs mail. We want to bury their desks with letters from citizens all over the state, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of every alert we give you. So there's a bill, there are 58 bills on the docket right now dealing just with elections. And there are 2 constitutional amendments on the docket right now dealing with elections. They are trying to force us into the popular vote. Can we imagine why? We have to stop this right now. We have 58. We need citizens all over the state. And I don't care what party you're from. I don't think that any citizen of the United States wants to know that we're going to be forced to vote in a way that we don't want to vote because we didn't get involved. We didn't send a letter. It's not expensive to buy a bunch of stamps and a bunch of letters. We'll give you the wording. We'll put it on our website. Those who are leading groups in their communities will send that information to you. You funnel it down to the people in your communities and say, send your letters now. We're going to name the bill, the author, and the amendment that it's in, because they amend 4 or 5 times before. So we want to hit it now at the amendment level and say this amendment you're trying to add, for instance, to the Office of Cybersecurity. We think this is unconstitutional. And when they hear from tens of thousands of citizens, those letters are on their table because they can't not receive them. They're going to know that, who woke those citizens up? Can't you guys just go back and yell at your TVs? We're busy here. They have to hear from us. If you don't want to drive to Sacramento, go to the committee hearings, send your letters. We are looking for teams who live close enough to Sacramento to take our message and go testify in those committee hearings. Every time there's a bad piece of legislation and the committee is going to hear it. We do send purpose statements, but that's not enough. They have to hear from us, see us, be buried in letters. They have to know that we woke up and that we're not saying it's okay anymore. And if they continue to pass bad bills, we are also now working with attorneys to go after those bad bills and repeal them, especially ballot harvesting. Self-governance is not voting, although voting is part of keeping the republic. But here's the problem. If all you do is vote, we have this system. Those who govern control citizens 365 days a year, nothing changes. California legislators govern over time somehow. Citizens only control those who govern 1.5 day per year when they vote. That's the only time they're having their voice heard. Now, I just told you our system is corrupt and easily manipulated. So even that half day a year that you take time to fill out your ballot or go to the polls and vote, if your ballot was manipulated, did you actually have a place in governing? No. So again, if all you're going to do is vote, at least vote in person, mark your ballot, put it in that secure ballot box, bing, it's done. Don't put it in an envelope. It has to be processed by law. It has to be looked over. Your ballot is not private if you vote with vote by mail. Now, some of you have to vote by mail. If you can, find a way to have someone take you to the polls. This new Voters' Choice Act is moving us further and further away from our vote. We are asking every citizen in every county to push back and say no. We have a choice in how we vote. But again, we have sort of learned in America, especially California, through being beaten down, well, we must be a democracy. They tell us we're a democracy. So our registrars and our Secretary of State wants to do the Voters' Choice Act and push us into all vote by mail eventually. So I guess we have to. So we're the 49%. We're just going to shut up and sit down. We're saying, please don't do that. Go with citizen groups over and over again to your registrar of voters, to your city councils, contact your legislators, contact your party leadership and say, we don't want this. We have had calls from Oregon, Washington, and Colorado who are pushed to all vote by mail ballot. They believe that that they have no voice in government either, for the same reason I'm telling you. If they win this Voters' Choice Act, we are in serious trouble in California because they will force us to go all vote by mail. And they're going to try to shut down our ability to observe the processing. Already in Fresno County, they locked out our teams from watching the processing of the ballots. They don't want us to see what they're doing. because we've already seen too much. Our lack of understanding of this basic keep the republic principle has resulted in our becoming easily manipulated by those who envision a very different America. California is in fact being transformed into a globalist socialist oligarchy. This transformation appears to be strategically orchestrated by using our election process. In order for any state to be transformed into a different form of government, such as a democracy or an oligarchy, our constitutional republic must collapse. In order to force transformation, civil rights must be ignored and violated, transparency must be limited, government must control election procedures in order to manipulate results, basic needs of citizens must be ignored, and government must control all resources. Do we see ourselves on our way to this? Every city in California has a massively growing homeless population. The basic needs of citizens are in fact being ignored. This is the basic picture. The 4 pillars of transformation. The constitutional republic is supposed to be held up by we the people, keeping the republic. When we forgot to do that, we now have the pressures of forced transformation, beginning with legislation. Legislation strategically orchestrates transformation, and this is happening at the federal level. Congress this year tried to pass H.R. 1. H.R. 1 is California election laws on steroids. We worked with our J. Christian Adams to provide them with documentation showing them that if they pass H.R. 1, the rest of the country is going to look like California. EIP and now EIPCA documented a pattern that shows our reports have been used to determine which issues weaken election process, and then those laws were written or updated that legalized the very issues that we uncovered in reports, which I mentioned earlier. Okay, the next thing is voter roll mismanagement. Noncompliance with state and federal requirements to ensure voter rolls are updated results in bloated voter rolls that can be used to manipulate elections. Until California completes the updating of the voter rolls, those voter rolls can still be manipulated. Election Integrity Project California, along with Judicial Watch, has been tasked to oversee the cleanup of the voter rolls. And we've begun that process already, and there's already problems in LA County and some of the other counties. So we're again working with Judicial Watch to potentially file legal action against all the other counties that had over 100% of voters on their databases. So we have to stay vigilant, we have to be on it. And that's because we have a lot of work to do.
Linda, I know we got started a little late, so it's like 10:43 right now.
Okay, let me get through quickly here. Election procedures, as I mentioned earlier, poll workers are not being taught the law, so they don't know when they're being manipulated. And then constitutional rights are ignored. When legislation is used to manipulate the process, civil rights are violated, and we lose our constitutional rights. Bottom line, steps of collapse is the corruption of election process facilitates erosion of civil rights, which facilitates growing government control. What do we do to stop transformation? Citizen self-governance. Citizens must actively participate in the process of governing. EIP's mission is to actively participate in the governing of our state and county and country by helping to ensure integrity of the elections, the right to choose our representatives by fair and honest elections. 8 years of observation and research resulted in filing, we talked about the lawsuit. I'm going to just go through this real quick since we're short on time. Bottom line, LA County, we documented 1.56 million. That's the beginning that they have to remove starting in 2019. Why did that happen? The Department of Justice gave California a pass on voter roll maintenance as well. And the result is in our lawsuit, we identified that California was not held accountable for failure to maintain its voter list for over 20 years. They had not removed one inactive for 20 years. Okay, I talked about the requirement already. What's next? The audit. We were going to do a massive audit. We are doing a massive audit. We were going to have a pre-audit survey phone calling with phone banking with all of citizens, and we were going to be calling on citizens to help us do the phone banking county by county. But with this new Office of Cybersecurity, we're going to take a different route. We need to learn more about it. Our attorneys are digging into it, but we do not want to put any of our volunteers at risk to be on a phone call doing a survey for us and then find out that this new Office of Cybersecurity was able to actually use the platform of our phones because they consider that part of the internet. use the platform of our phones to sort of try to catch us in saying the wrong things or catch citizens. So we're going to, so instead of taking the massive growing number of volunteers that we've been building for this, for the phone banking, we're going to ask you instead to please help us get involved in stopping bad legislation. And then this is the biggest one. We've already begun the process of asking for an Article 4, Section 4 investigation, hearing, or legal action from the federal government to California. The United States was founded as a constitutional republic, and Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution says, "The United States shall guarantee to every state in this union a republican form of government," not the party, but a constitutional republican form of government. "And it shall protect each of them against invasion, and on application of the legislature or the executive, when the legislature cannot be convened, against domestic violence." We are living in a state that is becoming more and more violence. More and more laws are passed that do not protect the citizens. And that's why we're asking for federal investigation. Yesterday, we just sent a massive 26-page report with a complaint to the Department of Homeland Security and to the Department of Justice, asking and demanding for an investigation into the state of California in 2019 before the 2020 elections. We must restore integrity to the election process in order to ensure self-governance. We must keep the republic. EIPCA is asking you to please consider being part of the growing number of counties preparing for 2020 and being involved now in stopping bad election in 2019. And I'll close it from there, and if there's time for questions, we can do questions.
You know what, Linda?
We're out of time.
We're out of time, but tell them where they can hear more tonight.
Tonight, at the workshop, we're going to go into more detail tonight about how Santa Clara County and any other counties that join us tonight. I'm going to walk you through how to establish community leadership teams, how to get your communities involved. To organize a whole county is a huge job, and so we've broken it down basically the same way the Indivisibles are. Don't know if you're familiar with them. The Indivisibles are a form of Tea Party that formed after the Tea Party. We infiltrated them in Calaveras County. Basically, their goals were to defeat Trump, prevent Kavanaugh from becoming a justice, and infiltrate the California elections. That is illegal, by the way, to infiltrate the elections, but we documented that they did. The Indivisibles are an organization that is working to change our form of government. We need to at least do the same. You just simply Google Indivisibles and then type in your county. They're in every county in the country.